towards the policy. And what we need to have in place within education institutions particularly are a set of anti-discriminatory policies, and that was really, if there's one lesson that we need in terms of policy from the Hyderabad incidents, it's that just as after a long struggle, we now have mandatory sexual harassment committees in institutions, we similarly need to be very alert towards caste discrimination, which until all these years we thought didn't exist inside institutions. Right? But now we know that it does, and it's a very important problem that needs to be addressed. As far as political representation and its translation into alteration, that's a very, very complicated process, and in no country does it happen within a few years. And yet, there are in fact very important studies that show that at the panchayat level, at the local bodies level, there is a big difference that political representation, the 73rd and 74th amendments have made in order to improve the material standards of living of Dalits and Adivasis in the small panchayat area. At the national level, it hasn't happened yet, but that's a longer struggle. So basically, the point I'm just going to sum up now is that the churning that's taking place in terms of caste disparities is really seen in the middle level, which is the level of the other backward classes, the OBC category, and certain other dominant groups that are today asking for inclusion into the OBC category. So on the one hand, we see that the gaps between Dalits, Adivasis, and so while on the one hand, we've seen an increase in disparities and discrimination between the upper castes and Dalits and Adivasis, there is in fact all the fluxes in the middle. And there has been important flux in the middle, and about which, the details of which I don't have time to go into today. But what I'd like to suggest is that this flux, this churning, is actually posing a new challenge now to the one policy that Dalits and Adivasis had in their favor, which is the quota policy. So today we have dominant communities like the Jats, Patels, Marathas in Maharashtra, Kapus, on the streets asking to be categorized as OBCs so that they get access to reservations, the same kind that OBCs have gotten earlier. So first, of course, we need to see whether these, on average, despite considerable differences within these communities, on average, what is the socioeconomic position of these groups? And it turns out, again, that if you look at the data, it turns out that on average, these groups are far from marginalized. In fact, their outcomes are closer to Brahmins and other forward castes in their respective states than they are to Dalits and Adivasis. Of course, having said that, we must recognize that there is a lot of differentiation within these communities, and these communities have also been affected by the overall changes that the Indian economy has gone through, particularly in the agrarian sector. So the agrarian crisis is affecting these communities as well, but not on an average scale. So on an average, they still remain far better off than the existing OBCs or Dalits or Adivasis in their respective states. The second point I'd like to make is that because of privatization of jobs and because of the fact that the total number of government jobs is actually declining, the limited entitlement of reservations for Dalits and Adivasis is already shrinking. In addition, if this instrument of reservations is opened up to groups that may not necessarily be marginalized, then in fact, I believe that it will end up eroding the very limited entitlement that Dalits have today in terms of a constitutional guarantee towards quotas. So instead of strengthening and deepening the quotas and working at post-access inclusion measures and thinking about what what kind of preferential or remedial measures can be adopted in the private sector. Instead of that, now the entire focus has been either give us reservations or abolish reservations altogether. So the argument these communities are making that we are powerful, and if you don't give us reservations, then nobody gets it. Either we get it or nobody gets it. And I believe that that's yet another challenge in addition to all the other challenges that I talked about in terms of that little sliver that Dalits had and Adivasis had in terms of, I completely believe that this is not enough, but at least it is a tiny sliver which needs to be kept in place and protected. But these new demands and these changes are likely to further erode that limited entitlement. So there is a lot of churning, there's a lot of flux, and I'll only end by saying that we should analyze it in terms of material realities, not look at it in simple electoral terms about, this political party benefiting from these many votes, etc. That may or may not happen, but it's a bigger churning that we need to understand and appreciate, and continue to fight caste disparities and discrimination by producing a body of knowledge which is evidence-based, methodical, and rigorous. Thank you very much.